General Secretary of the National Union of Rail, Maritime and Transport Workers, joins me now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
I got caught up in this, Mick, yesterday. I know it wasn't the RMT, it was ASLEF. But could you just explain where you are and what you're trying to achieve? My understanding is the RMT have been offered 5% and 4%, so making a total of 9%. Did you put that to the members?
No, we can't put that to members because the government has stipulated in their proposal that we must declare the dispute over. And then they want us to go and negotiate this 4%, as you've put it, in the second year with a whole host of terms and conditions changes, which will be detrimental to our people and detrimental to the public, we believe, in the way that they want to run the service. So they want us to give away our leverage and our mandate and our ability to negotiate on a blind bet, really, and we're not prepared to do that because you don't give up your leverage halfway through a negotiation. So that's not acceptable. And it can't go to our people. We've consulted our people in mass meetings all around the country. They've had all the documentation, and during that period, we reballoted our people, and they voted 9-1 on a big turnout in the ballots to continue with the campaign and continue with this action that we're taking today. So until we get a new position from the government, rather than the incompetent mess that we've got, we will be embroiled in this dispute, and they are dictating to the companies, as per the contracts that they've got with them, what they can offer and what they can't offer, what their stance is. And they're locked into this dispute because I think they want to drive down wages of working people, which we've seen in the health service and education and other areas, so that working people get poorer. I don't know why they want to pursue that. I think it's so that there's a transfer of wealth between working people and richer people, and that's the way the country's being run at the moment.
Can I just jump in? I know ASLEF look after train drivers. We were talking about actually their salaries are pretty good. In terms of the RMT, you look after a broader range of people who work. Some of them don't earn very much money at all. What sort of money are you looking for? What would break this dispute? Also, just in terms of the terms and conditions, the government is simply saying, surely, the railways need to modernise. We have to change working practices. We have to change Sunday working.
Well, we have Sunday working. Our members, all of them on this picket line behind me, will be working tomorrow. They're all contracted to work Sundays, and they work roughly 26 Sundays a year on their rosters. They work round the clock and work Sundays. Trains run on Sundays now. So there's a bit of a myth about how Sundays operate, and it's something that Grant Shapps has perpetuated and other ministers. They tell mistruths and half-truths all the time, and they get repeated in the media endlessly, which seems to be the role of the media now, just to spout what the government tells them. So we have a Sunday working agreement. We've got them in every one of those train operating companies. We've got them in Network Rail. So there are changes that they want to, that they don't talk about, which is shutting all of the booking offices in Britain, which will make it harder for people to travel, make it harder for the disabled and people who feel vulnerable to feel secure in their travel, and will make the railways a less friendly, dehumanised environment. So we want to make the railway warm, pleasant, welcoming and a friendly place to travel. We want the railway to do well. We'd also like it in the public sector, so it's run in the interest of the people, not in the hands of the privateers. We're going to make £400 million of profit
but the railways
this year on government subsidy.
The railways have been bailed out to £16 billion to keep them afloat. The rail network doesn't work properly.
They didn't need to be bailed out in that way.
Well, who's going to bail them out then?
They needed to be subsidised because these private sector operators are ripping the country off by taking profit. While they were taking that subsidy, and our members worked all the way through that, by the way, that pandemic.
Indeed.
They paid themselves £400 million of profit from that subsidy, and the rolling stock leasing companies were taking £200 million of profit out of the system, where their trains were stacked up in the siding. So we've got a completely corrupt railway system, which the Tory party has invented, and then they claim they have to give those private sector operators subsidy. The people that I negotiate across the table with are drawing salaries of in excess of £500,000, while telling our people you can't have a pay rise for 4 years. My members behind me here have not had a pay rise for 4 years on the trot.
Mate, let me just bring in Dr. Renee. Dr. Renee.
Hi, Mick. I understand completely what you're saying about the people you're negotiating with taking £500,000 salaries and shareholders. Of course I do. The only thing I'm going to ask you is the last time that the train companies were nationalised, they were appalling. Absolutely.
No, they weren't.
Appalling.
That's completely untrue.
But they were. They didn't work. They certainly didn't work any better than they do now. They were always late. We never seemed to find a solution.
They were completely... Well, this is just a cliche that you're bandying around that you've picked up from somewhere. The railways worked very well under British Rail.
They did not. And they were always late. They were dirty.
Are you going to let me finish? If you want to ask me a question, you must let me finish it. The railways were completely under-subsidised. Under British Rail, the last year of British Rail operation, it was subsidised for £1 billion. Under the private sector, as you've just pointed out, there's now subsidised for £16 billion.
Indeed.
So if British Rail had that subsidy, we'd have had one of the best services in the world. They were completely underfunded. The rolling stock was allowed to continue for 40 or 50 years. Indeed, we were using stuff from before the Second World War under British Rail. So given the funding that it had, it ran a remarkable service. Now, people just put these cliches around and don't understand any of the challenges that British Rail had. We're not calling for British Rail to be brought back. We want a public service that's run in the interest of the people, that's run in the interest of our economy, and indeed in the interest of the environment in our country. And we can get that if we get rid of these corrupt practices that we've got, where people are taking subsidy and delivering that to shareholders directly from the pockets of the taxpayer and the fare payer. And in the meantime, they can't run a service. This government has admitted that 5 of these companies cannot run a railway. That's why the Tories have renationalised them. And indeed, one of them, South Eastern, they declared that they could not be trusted with public money because they were cooking the books a couple of years ago. So it's hardly a panacea. Private sector operation.
Can I just ask, what would break the strike? So if you've been offered 5% and 4%, is there a percentage that would break that strike, or is it actually you want to? I don't know what you're aiming for, or is this, as many of our viewers are saying, they believe this is entirely politically motivated?
Well, it's completely not politically motivated. What political motivation do I have? The government is elected by the voters through the ballot box, and we believe in that, because we are Democrats. But the government is also accountable for what it does in power. They have intervened in this dispute. They took all these contracts and they put stipulations into those contracts that the Secretary of State, Mark Harper, previously Grant Shapps, is directly responsible for their negotiating mandate, what they can offer, and what they can say when they're in the room with me. That's written into their contracts. So he's running this show, and he's politically motivated, but he can't get himself out of it. In the middle of it, he's had to take one of these companies into public ownership and run it himself, because he can't trust these private sector operators.
Dr. Renee.
Mick, if everything that you're saying is true, and I do understand about
everything I say is true. You must understand that. But what I mean is
on how you feel, then instead of affecting people trying to travel around, carry their kids around, get to work, rather than just affect the companies, why don't you open up the gates, still run the trains, but don't take any money, which is an idea that we've had suggested to us.
And also, Mick, everyone does think it's entirely cynical to hold it today when we're hosting Eurovision on behalf of Ukraine, which is a war-torn country. That just seems pretty unacceptable.
I'll deal with that in a moment. So on the idea of having a revenue strike, as it's called, which is legal in Australia, that is illegal in this country. The Conservative government made that illegal, and when we've tried to do it, they've threatened to take me to court and my predecessors and take injunctions out against us. Under the anti-trade union laws, that is illegal as an action.
I didn't know
this thing about Eurovision.
Yeah.
We have not targeted Eurovision, all the games at Wembley or anything else that's going on today. The anti-trade union laws that we have, Conservative legislation, means that we have to give 2 weeks' notice and that our mandates run for 6 months. This is the last day under that mandate that we can take strike action. It runs out tomorrow, and if we didn't take the action today, we wouldn't have been able to take any action at all. So it's the Conservative legislation that dictates that.
But you could have done it yesterday.
Well, you'd have blamed us for that as well.
Well, the ASLEF were on strike, so but I might as well have had no trains at all, which I had anyway.
Well, our members have said to us they want to strike on Saturdays. The reason for that is Saturday is now the busiest day on the railway. And, of course, we want to make our action effective. We don't dictate when Eurovision is. We haven't said that we want to interfere with that. We hope that people enjoy themselves. We hope that the event goes successfully. And we don't support, we're not against Ukraine. We regard that over there as an illegal invasion by a tyrannical government, which is an illegal thing that should end immediately, and the Russians should withdraw. So we're in solidarity with Ukrainian railway workers and Ukrainian people. So there's none of that angle to it. We're running an industrial dispute in this country under the legislation that the Tories have put in to try and suppress that. And, of course, they're bringing in more legislation now to stop us striking at all because they've lost the arguments about austerity and about the cost of living in our country.
Mick, thank you very much indeed for your time. That's Mick Lynch, General Secretary of the National Union of Rail.